Hello and welcome to Dr. Deep State. I have a special guest today, a fellow Texan, John Carter, and the title of our show today is The Amazon and Apocalypse Now. John Carter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Dr. Hogan. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. No, your topic sounds very interesting. He's been exchanging information with me for quite a while. The background, obviously, from the title, he has an interest in Brazil, the environmental movement, sort of some occult ties to that movement, and so he's going to tell us a bit about his story. John, would you like to open up with a prayer?
I would. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Hear, O God, my prayer. When I make supplications to thee, deliver my soul from the fear of the enemy. Thou hast protected me from the assembly of the malignant, from the multitude of the workers of iniquity. For they have whetted their tongues like a sword. They have bent their bow a bitter thing, to shoot in secret the undefiled. They will shoot at him on a sudden, and will not fear. They are resolute in wickedness. They have talked of hiding snares. They have said, what shall see them? They have searched after iniquities. They have failed in their search. Man shall come to a deep heart, and God shall be exalted. The arrows of children are their wounds, and their tongues against them are made weak. All that saw them were troubled, and every man was afraid. And they declared the works of God and understood his doings. The just shall rejoice in the Lord and shall hope in him, and all the upright in heart shall be praised. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. So that prayer to me is kind of branding ourselves in the sign of the cross for the times that we're in, and understanding the fullness of what's going on, that it's out of our hands. It's not going to be solved by man. And the tremendous battle plan that has been put in place by the synagogue against us, and we're light years behind them. And I think this is part of the talk today, is how the environmental movement is used, was weaponized as both as a proxy for the banks and also the spiritual element in Gnosticism. So I guess I'd like to tell you, Dr. Hogan, kind of how I got into this. And you can't make it up. And it kind of, God does have a sense of humor when you think about it, when I think about it at least. I grew up in Texas, grew up in San Antonio, Catholic mom, Irish Catholic. My dad was Presbyterian, Scotch. So I have Calvinistic Presbyterianism and Irish Catholicism, and that's a confusing family. Grew up in a family of oil and gas and ranching. And I eventually went into, after I graduated from college, I went to join the military. And I like to say I served the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds in the Persian Gulf. And typical brainwashed, red-blooded Texan, to go off and do the bidding of the synagogue and fight their wars without even knowing it and being a useful idiot. I got out of the Army to go join. I got accepted to a course called the Ranch Management Program at Texas Christian University.
John, let me butt in. When did you have your Smedley Butler moment? In the military, or did it take you a few years afterwards?
Oh Lord, no. It took
many years.
decades.
Okay, I didn't want to lose your flow. Keep going, please.
Yeah, no. The military, especially going into once you get into infantry, airborne, ranger units, and you move up, the brainwashing is thick, and they train you up, they don't train you down, and so you're turned loose into society, kind of a wild man, to be honest. I went immediately to school, to a building that was called the Winthrop Rockefeller Building, for ranch management. It was set up once. Now I know, I didn't then, but the Rockefellers invested heavily in education and business schools in Latin America and the United States to create managers to throw out there in this finance capitalism, monopoly capitalism, whereby over a period of time, you're just out competing the other people because you're better trained. You got access to cheaper credit. You got access to corrupt politicians. So that's part of the Rockefeller Model post-World War II. And I entered into it. It's a phenomenal course for land management, natural resource management, land stewardship. Professors are all godly people, and it's about taking care of God's creation. And land management is land stewardship, stewarding the land and its animals while you make a living from it. So that's where I happened to have a assigned seat next to a girl who was from Brazil, and she had come to Texas. This is crazy. I'll just put it out there, but she came to Texas because of her family's involvement in ranching in Brazil, specifically in the Amazon, and running head to head up against Shiko Menz, who was really a war proxy revolutionary for the World Revolutionary Movement. International Jewry, what's going on. Crazy story, but anyway, my wife came to Texas to visit her uncle who had to leave the Amazon because Shiko Menz put a hit on him, tried to kill him. Shiko Menz, by the way, was promoted by New York, a clan from New York, including the Environmental Defense Fund and some other big NGOs that used him and promoted him as the savior of the Amazon. Well, he tried to kill my wife's uncle, so she came to visit him in Texas, found out about this course, and we ended up going to school together and ended up getting married. And after 2 years of getting pressure from my father-in-law to move there and manage a frontier ranch in the southern Amazon, I ended up asking my wife's, he was a mentor for her. He wasn't a godfather, but he was very important man in her life from Brazil. And he befriended me and mentored me. And he said, John, if you like the outdoors, you like to hunt and fish, you like cattle, this is the last place in the world where you can go build your own empire in the Amazon. And you'll be a fool not to come. And anyway, I said, well, you sold me. And so I called my father-in-law and said, hey, we're going to come. And that mentor, had been the ranch manager of Winthrop Rockefeller's ranch in the Pantanal in Brazil. So, here I go to school with the building that says Winthrop Rockefeller. The guy that convinces me to go to Brazil was his manager. And I'm getting inserted into this heart of darkness, into the Amazon that's really controlled at the top by the banks that the Rockefellers, launched this development process back in post-World War II. So my wife and I decided to move. I took off in a single engine bush plane, a tail dragger, in 1996, left Austin, Mueller Airport, and flew to the southern Amazon basin, flew a single engine down, picked my wife up in Belém, which is Portuguese for Bethlehem. And we landed in a region of the northeastern corner of Mato Grosso state. Mato Grosso stands for thick forest in Portuguese. And it was where the frontier was advancing into forest that was 100 feet high, 120 feet high, big carpet. And so we landed at the ranch, and the ranch is named after my wife's, my father-in-law's grandmother, Hope Esperanza, from Spain. They were from Spain, from Galicia. And my father-in-law's dad left the Spanish Civil War. He was too young to fight, and he went to Brazil to try to save his life. That's how they ended up in Brazil. And so they had this ranch in the southern Amazon with no electricity, no telephone, about 18 hours from a hospital, and in a region called by the locals Vale dos Esquecidos, or Valley of the Forgotten. Valley of the Forgotten, very dark, sinister, and we had no clue what we were getting into. But we were in an area that was predominantly forest. It had some large ranches that had been clear cut using government money that came from a Brazilian development bank called SUDAM, which is the Superintendency of the Development of the Amazon. That was launched in the 60s with American proxies, meaning Brazilian politicians and the president, Kubitschek. But it was the Rockefellers behind it that was funding it. And so to fund the development, just like the American West, you know, send out the defeated Southerners, go out there and, you know, tame the land, and we'll build the railroads, and then we'll take control of the main power centers and all the minerals. And that's what happened. That's what happened in the Amazon. So we land in this area, Wild West, very dangerous. Within weeks, we were having people trying to ambush us on our property. Our neighbors have, one neighbor is 200,000 acres. And of that 200,000 acres, about 110 was forest, standing forest, and it was actively being invaded by squatters, armed groups, armed gunmen. And so we soon found out that the dynamics of the region. And I'm telling you all this because this is very important to understand the environmental movement today and why they ignore all this and why they use this chaos and turmoil to their benefit in this dialectic. But our region was called, our county was called Good Jesus of the Araguaia, Bon Jesus do Araguaia. The local sheriff, his name was Black Rose, and Negahosa, and his deputy was called, of all things, Messias. So that was our little county. The name of our ranch was Hope Esperanza. And there my wife and I are 28 and 30 years old, and dealing with massive violence. And so we were witnessing massive fires in the dry season, dozens of fires, mushroom clouds that would be 25 to 35,000 feet, literally, that would start their own thunderstorms, massive deforestation. And that was very traumatizing, frankly, because you're seeing, as a pilot, me as the pilot flying and on the ground driving, seeing this vast wilderness of green under assault, under siege, and not from an environmental perspective, more from a greed perspective. It's untethered greed, which was unleashed in speculation, etc. And in that wave of the frontier, you don't have law, you have lawlessness. And anyway, that's why our region was called Valley of the Forgotten, because it was pretty much forgotten, and it was really up to you being your own boss and meaner than hell, basically. Our county at one time was the size of probably the size of Oklahoma. It was massive, and that that county was called Baja de Garces, and there was a famous bishop that was a bishop of that Prelazia, or the parish, and he was the bishop of our region too. And we didn't know that he was part of the liberation theology movement, and he was one of its leaders. He'd been trained in Cuba. He would go to events in Nicaragua and El Salvador in Central America with the command and control of this Marxist movement. And he was working hand in hand with people from the environmental movement, people that I would later come to meet. So in this reality where we lived on a 22,000 acre ranch with 5,000 head of cattle, with cowboys and workers who were illiterate. A bunch of them had already killed men. Most of the people we met in the frontier had either killed somebody or seen somebody kill. It was a very violent place, and there was no law. So in seeing that daily and understanding the dynamics that the very federal agencies that were set up to control deforestation, to control settlement, were actually part of the game and getting paid off, as were the police and the entire hierarchy. It really struck a chord in me, and with my military background, and the slogan "Rangers lead the way," I told my wife, I said, this is crazy. We can work with landowners, and we can create a system of land stewardship that, look what the world's saying, look what the media is saying. They want, they're saying that consumers want to know where their food comes from. Well, we can produce it, and certainly they're going to buy it from us and create an incentive for us to do the right thing. And we can create a movement of good in the land of evil. And that was pretty naive. And I didn't know how things worked as I do now. Nevertheless, that led me on the trail of discovery, where I used my training, my education, etc., to create a land stewardship movement made up of private property in the Amazon basin. And we wanted a scientific agency or organization to come in to validate our land stewardship practices. And lo and behold, the one I choose or link up with is the head of the snake. And it's the head of the snake of the factory of false narratives on climate change and sustainability. It pumps out all the garbage into the pipeline, and that's up in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, called Woods Hole Research Center. They've changed the name now to George Woodwell Research Center. And anyhow, that's kind of the background of how this whole thing started. If you don't mind going to that map you can
Yeah,
show the
I
map.
will. And I'm just, I think I can pull, I believe, a lot of these things together. Over on Locals, we're doing a multi-part series trying to work with this giant dialectic going on between what we call technological singularity and Noahide. And you're hitting on a bunch of pieces. You've used the word dialectic, but essentially what you're going to hit on in a moment, I don't know if we're going to do this on Locals or not, is these people that you're talking about at the head of the snake are eugenicists. And it's kind of tricky, and you're going to get into that. But within this larger colonial imperial project, they want people to clear the land, like you said, and the bankers and the eugenicists are going to then come back later and usurp the minerals and the rights. It's kind of a long-term plan. So whether we're talking about communism, the corporate power of the Rockefellers, liberation theology, it all fits together into an agenda that we've talked about that the Jesuits pulled out in 1890 when they looked at what was going on in the state of Europe since the French Revolution. And that is for a particular, it's the head of the snake owning all the resources of the world. So I just kind of want to remind us when we say the Amazon is burning, John, you're with me. This is part of a larger, global warming, this larger World Economic Forum agenda of grabbing the resources. So you're hitting one part that you're dealing with experientially. Does that sound good before I hit the slide here, John?
Yeah, that's actually a great primer. I don't know if you can see this book. It's probably called Thy Will Be Done, The Conquest of the Amazon, Nelson Rockefeller in the Age of Oil. The authors took 18 years of research to write it. And I started reading this 7-8 years ago when I was researching. And I was looking under the auspices of financial power globalists, that whole dead end trap where they never reveal who's really behind it. And nevertheless, this book is pretty much the whole battle plan for the development of the Amazon basin by the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. And it's mimicked in Indonesia, it's mimicked in Africa, replicated. And so I think in my expertise for what I did in the military was long range reconnaissance. We operated behind enemy lines, so we're trained to sit, listen, smell, observe, and shut the heck up. Because you're behind enemy lines, 6 men, and so that rationale is what I applied to the Amazon. I was behind enemy lines in the Amazon, and then I got inserted deep into the environmental movement, and I saw the belly of the beast. And so coming back, I can say, large part due to what you've been teaching, which I'm very grateful for. It all started to click. I mean, it's like, okay, it all makes sense now, and how the Amazon is really a part of a bigger part of a new Eden, and it matches the new sacrifice, the Holocaust, fire and ash, the Amazon, fire and ash. But we're going to create a tikkun olam. We're going to create a new world. We're going to put the sparks back together. And lo and behold, you look at all these leaders and everything I'm going to be talking about, every one of them's Jewish. I didn't know at the time. Yeah. So
what Apocalypse Now is about. Tikkun Olam, you bet. Tikkun Olam. Yep.
Yeah. So on that slide of the map of the Amazon, which is I don't think it's there. It's on another PowerPoint. There's the one that has the green.
Yep, I can pull it up.
Yeah, that that map right there is very confusing to look at for the untrained eye. But what you're looking at is the black line that's going around is the Brazilian boundary of the Amazon basin. It's about 50% of Brazil's landmass is in the Amazon. There are 9 states, Brazilian states in the Amazon basin. And then there's like 6 countries that comprise the Amazon. But Brazil is by and large the largest landowner of that land in the Amazon. And if you look at this map, you go, what the heck are all those lines? Well, that's called post-World War II, State Department, Allen Dulles, John Foster Dulles, CIA, Secretary of State, all that. And the Rockefellers lobbying Brazil, doing a CIA coup to overthrow President Vargas to then be able to send U.S. Air Force aircraft to Brazil to map for its mineral resources. And they mapped it in the 50s. After the mapping project, World Wildlife Fund was created by Prince Bernhard from Holland and Prince Philip, King Charles's dad. And so World Wildlife Fund was deployed as a mapping agency under the guise of Save the Panda. Go out there. Now we're going to put parks and Indian reserves on top of all those mineral resources to take them out of the free market and inventory them for us and keep them away from those nasty brown people.
And we're going to tell everybody we're philanthropists and we're doing it for the public good. And that's the long range program. That's what
John D. Rockefeller throwing dimes out and his, his little tricks. So there's a hierarchy in that process where CEOs of large multinationals are then promoted to be CEOs of the nonprofits because they're truly operating as special operations. And they're large part lobbying foreign interests in their governments to pass laws and only laws to take that land and put it into their hands. So if you look at this map and you think about all the rhetoric that we've listened to since the 80s about the Amazon and deforesting the Amazon, the biodiversity, the soils are bad, etc. And then you wonder, well, gosh, those bad white people, sorry, E. Michael Jones, but those bad German, Italian migrants from southern Brazil, who they're bad because they really left Germany in 1850s because of the Marxists, just like the Irish left, thanks to the induced famine and to go be slaves in the U.S. It's the same dialectic or same process.
It is.
And so they pushed these Germans over and these Italians, who are phenomenal people, and they're hard workers, and they go out in the frontier. They're frontier busters, just like North Dakota, South Dakota, that Norwegian stock, and a lot of Catholics still in that region, and because they're not afraid to go get a homestead and try to make it work. And so those people are used as the bulldozer. And in front of them, you've got the ranchers, and in front of them, you have the loggers. And so there's a process of settlement that first go in the loggers, then come in the ranchers, because you can move cattle on the hoof to market. And then once the infrastructure is put in place, then farming comes in.
And even if you can maintain, by the way, I never talk about this, but I grew up in the frozen plains in a ranch environment, and my dad was in soils. He got his degrees in soils and land management. So I've never really talked about this, but all the stuff you're saying, that's his background in education. But yeah, even if you managed up there to keep the family farm, your ass is owned by Monsanto, and they'll tell you that.
Yes. Okay. Tangent. At the end of this presentation, I'll reveal. But after what I chased was my passion, I guess, unrestrained passion, and this burning desire to fix it. And that's what soldiers do. I mean, ultimately, that's what you're tapping into when you send an 18-year-old off to war. And that's what I was doing in the Amazon. At the end of that process, I had created what's on this map of these white dots. So I'll explain this map real quick. Those yellow outlines are all indigenous lands. And so those are all the campaigns to make parks around different tribes, in large part to World Wildlife Fund, subsequently Conservation International. and then Environmental Defense Fund. Each NGO has its role. It's like a combined arms concept of artillery, infantry, Air Force, whatever. It's armor. You've got all these different NGOs. One's legal, one's marketing, one's lobby, one's indigenous, and it's a blitzkrieg attack. And so since 1960 roughly, they have placed into parks conservation units, state and federal, and also into Indian lands over 50% of the Amazon basin. 50%. And that's what's on that's outlined on there. And this is done by my staff with GIS, so it's accurate. And then another 25% is owned by the Brazilian government. It's just undeclared land. So 75% of the Amazon is in the hands of the people that are supposed to save it. So there is no problem in the Amazon. If you tore down the other 25% of private property, you still don't have a problem. You still have 75% of the basin standing. But they never tell you that in the New York Times or the Washington Post, So I was in this region, and this you can see the white dots in a big park in the middle, elongated kind of curves. That's the Xingu National Park, and we were right to the east of that. And we were right in the heart of the worst violence of the frontier process. All that red actually is a fire map over about a 12-year period. This map is old. It's a 2014 map. But that map shows where all the fire events were in the Amazon. And of course, they're along that belt of deforestation. And then the white dots are actually farms and ranches that joined our group called Aliança da Terra, which is Land Alliance. And we create management plans on an individual basis for soil conservation, native vegetation, water quality, erosion, etc. Very tangible criteria to create a model market driven that we're going to create a seal and then hope that Monsanto and Bayer and Archer's Daniel Midland and Cargill and all these nice people would buy from us in the slaughter plants, JBS, etc. Because
it's where you get the neoliberalism and the Marxism come together for this same Zio imperialist project. And if you look at this is if you look at what they're doing in Ukraine right now, they got those same maps, how we're going to split it up, where the developers are going to go. So this is just one microcosm of how they roll at a global level.
Yeah, exactly. I love speaking to you. It's just such a breath of fresh air. And then those white dots really was an assault, a counter assault, or a counter revolution to that development model. And our scientific partner was a traitor. We didn't know it. I didn't know it. I was naive. I trusted him. I mean, that's our problem is, the Catholic Christendom. Our problem is we have virtue and the synagogue doesn't. And so they're tricking us right and left. Well, I got my ass tricked. And I was their poster boy, launching this land stewardship in my mind with God as the creator in charge. In their mind, creation's in charge. And two different models. One is sustainability, environmentalism. The other is land stewardship, God-centered. Father Fahey, writes about it.
So the stewardship, as they're using it, that's their kind of hook for soft-hearted people, Christians, that don't know what they're up against. And it's the same formula they use in the, fraternity, brotherhood. It's that same idea because they know how to sucker you with those kind of phrases and take advantage of the Christ inside of us and those people that aren't kind of wise as serpents. When you get burned, you start kind of figuring it out and get a little bit of pattern recognition going. And then like you're doing, you spread the word. And part of it, I don't know your feelings about this, and this is your presentation. I don't want to jump in, but I think what we have to start realizing is we have a ZOG, occupied government. And as long as you consent to that, we're going to continue to get burnt. So whatever people want to do, until you recognize that fact that our government is occupied and we've been colonized down to the biopolitical level of how you think about things, whatever you do is only going to be at service to them, whether you're going to the left or the right, north or south. It's going to be at service to them until you realize this. And what you're saying is helpful. When you show area, by the way, my dad used to do these for both minerals and soils. I always down in the basement sketching out these maps until you can kind of see from their imperialist perspective what they're up to. Then you can see into the minutia, the rhetoric they're throwing out, and you say, no, I'm not going to play that. Anyway, go ahead, John.
No, that's great. That's exactly right. And I think that's where God uses us when we go through those trials and we learn in the school of hard knocks that ends up knock me down to a low state of depression because I had to evaluate my service in the military, what we did in Iraq, um, everything, and out of it came back like, what in the hell are we going to do? And then you go, well, if we take a punch, that's what they want us to do, and that's where this revival, and I'm not a traditional Catholic. I'm not a Nova Soto Catholic. I'm a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Catholic, and I'm not conservative. I'm not liberal. I'm Catholic, and I think that's really what we're trying to do is come out and tell the truth and prepare ourselves sufficiently. Which you do. You're doing God's work by training us to have the confidence. The facts and the it's all organized that you just can't counter the truth. Yeah, everyone's welcome their opinion, but there's only one truth, and we're sitting on truth. So when I look at this map, and the stress that I went through building with my team and the goodwill of farmers and ranchers, most of them Catholic, the vast majority Catholic, and all of those cities and counties that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago, the county seats were just forests. Today, there's towns of 10,000, 20,000. They're run by the Masons. It's all Freemasonic. So E. Michael Jones needs to go down to Brazil with me. God bless them. That structure, they don't need the Freemasons to overthrow governments anymore because they've all been taken over. All of us have been taken over, but they maintain that mid-level tier of scum that runs the governments and the courts and the judicial system and all that. There's no doubt about it. And so here the Catholics are out there doing the hard labor, and under this straitjacket of laws and environmental movement attacks and slander, I'll tell you on this map, every white dot is a farm or a ranch, on average 10,000 acres. That's how big land is in the Amazon. So this is 10 years ago, we had about 1,000 properties. Today we have close to 8,000, each with a management plan that is doing above and beyond what all these idiots say that we should be doing. And that's actually tangible. And after a while, we started processing this data, and we were showing results in forest standing, soil conservation that were exponentially above what World Wildlife Fund, Nature Conservancy, Conservation International, and these massive bingos, these big environmental groups were doing. So when I look at that map, I think, well, that's a huge threat because we are manning at 25% of the Amazon and actually proving that private property, not necessarily private property, it's more that if you give a man and a woman a chance, they're going to do the right thing. And if you give them the guidelines to do it, they'll do the right thing. And so we called their bluff. We built the model. I had been to climate conferences, private meetings with his Royal High Ass, I call him, the Highness Prince Charles at the time, Al Gore, all these people and all these promises, and they lied. They're liars. They never came through with what they said they were going to do. They lied. We produced, our farmers and ranchers, myself included, my wife, and then all of a sudden things started to change because instead of being a tool to use in the media, they had to be careful because we were exposing their underbelly. So if you could go to the next slide, I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there. I really don't care, frankly. I mean, I just really don't care. These people are revolutionaries. They're our enemies. They're my enemy. That's for sure. And that's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to do on the sorrowful mysteries and pray that last mystery and love thy enemy. That's not easy. And I get anxious even thinking about it. But if you look on that's not the one.
Oh.
That's not. It's the PDF file. If you scroll down on that map, where that map was, it should be a PDF file. Yeah. I don't know. That's odd.
What does it look like?
It's got a photo of all these the leadership, pictures of the people. It might be. I can send it to you again. It doesn't
Well, we
really
can
matter.
also we're gonna be probably hopping over to locals here for, if it's some really intense stuff, we can put it over on locals. Do you want would we be off that slide I just said with eugenesis and stuff like that?
Yes,
Would you
yes,
be able to talk about that now? Because we are gonna be going over locals and really kind of being more
yeah.
candid.
Well, I'll go into. I have it in front of me, so I'll just talk about it. But inadvertently, um, I was meeting people of that were lieutenants of the bankers, really. In the you got to think of the nonprofits. They're proxies for the banks. They have a
Right.
dual role, and there's a dual role, just like the Holocaust narrative has a spiritual component, which is a new sacrifice, and as well as a temporal component, which is the creation of the state of Israel. And so you got these, you know, different components, spiritual and temporal, where Israel is going to become the new promised land, uh, thanks to the Talmud, which redefines reinterprets the Torah, and as the same thing with the Amazon becomes a new Eden, and you've got the spiritual component, which is this new Eden and coming back to the garden in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then you got the temporal version, which are the minerals. So that took me forever to understand. I was always seeing the temporal. I could never see the spiritual, but I could always feel the spiritual, because when I go to these meetings, you feel a dark presence. Literally, you feel this very dark presence.
Their
You know,
agenda coming out. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Going to the Royal Institute, Chatham House. I mean, I'm telling you, it's you can see the demons flying around. You could cut it with a knife. Yeah. So, I reached out to a man who was interviewed in a very famous Brazilian periodical. It's a Time magazine in Brazil called Veja, and of course, it was founded with the infrastructure in Brazil was put in place after World War II by the Rockefellers. They had an investment group called IBEC, and then they, like they do in every country, they will pick out the oligarchs who are normally Jewish, and they co-invest with them to create monopoly capitalism in each industry. So whether it be cellulose and timber, mining, electricity, commercial real estate, media, the Marinho family. Saying these names, it's dangerous. Because they don't screw around in Brazil. They don't either here too. If we look at some people who've been killed lately, but the point is that they will put their claws into the oligarchs. They work behind the scenes as they pull the strings of the politicians. They're all bought off. All of them have an owner. They all have a corporate boss. And I've been told that by Brazilian senators on various occasions. And so then they come in, they put this infrastructure in, and they started that in the 50s, of course. They took over the media, they took over banking, they took over all these industries, and then they launched globally a group called CAN, the Climate Action Network of 1,200 NGOs that were launched out into the space to start promoting this rhetoric in a political space globally. So I happened to reach out to the head of the snake of the fake science. And the fake science is what you've been talking about. Uh, it's simple. E. Michael Jones talks about it. It's Darwinism, and this new reality, this replacement theology that is very sinister. And they put a lot of money into this one organization where they trained all these scientists. Then are the PhD advisors for PhD candidates at University of Florida, Gainesville, University of Wisconsin, Madison, Arizona State. The top dogs are from Yale and Harvard always, and they created this army across the Americas of these little widgets that are called ecologists or whatever that are promoting their agenda. And you go to college, you go to University of Florida, Gainesville. Who in the hell is going to hire you as an ecologist? Well, an environmental movement. No one else. You're going to either go teach or you're going to go join the environmental movement and become a lobbyist. And so that
Okay, everybody, I am going to give John just one moment. If he does not come back here, we are going to be over on locals. And I'm going to give him just 2 more minutes. I find this very fascinating. What he calls monopoly capitalism, if you think about the development, it's in really, just get your pattern recognition going on, the worldwide development. But for example, in America, we think about how it really was strung together through the railroads in the mid 19th century. So from the railroads, all of the monopolies, and this was, let me see. Oops, I'm still off. John, can you hear me? All of the railroads, once you got that, and this used to be in, in the progressive press in the late 1900s, the families that came out of this, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Mellons, the Pullmans, the Morgans, all were associated with that. Through all other monopoly capture came through the railroads because they did the price fixing. So they would control the agricultural production and the prices on that and everything at the retail end. So it's the same essential families. And when you kind of uncovered who was really owning this, it really did go back to the city of London. And that's a city that's essentially like a ship on the sea. It's sovereign. It's not connected to anybody. Interconnected directorates. So it's a small handful of people that were able to capture the development of the railroad, but it's that initial infrastructure, that initial thread. And so through that, you're eventually usurping the land and the mineral rights. And again, the development of the national parks. They had a long view of this because essentially that becomes untouched and can be used later. And when we see the Agenda 30 plans, they work so beautifully, all these sort of national parks. And what John's suggesting here is the key, and that we all know, global warming, and that agenda is going to be a big part of how they come now after everybody else has kind of tilled the land, cleaned the, forged the ditches and cleaned the land. Then they can kind of come back and can take complete possession of this. John, are you with us? Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get a hold of John again, and we're going to finish this over on locals. And again, if you're not, if you've made it this far with us, thank you for joining us. Most of the activity, every single week we look at the JQ, especially these days through the agenda of 1890 that was disclosed going on all over Europe. It speaks to everything going on today, including what John is talking about. We are talking in depth week for week, going over and just looking at the direction of history through the singularity and Noahide, and how they're all coming together right now in sort of an apocalypse now scenario. And so I invite you to at least go over there and look what's going on. And I definitely encourage you to go over there and become a member. It's $5 a month, and I'll leave the links down below. So thanks everybody for being with us here. And are you there, John? And I'm going to get a hold of John, and we're going to bring it over to locals. So thank you, everybody on YouTube.